Uncle John, welcome back. It is Wednesday. We are back here at Barely Qualified Picks, and we have got a lot to talk about, mainly NFL. But as you know, I wrote something this week that is intended to address the biggest issue of the college football playoff and college football in general, which is still the only sport that doesn't decide its postseason participants on the field, which means it doesn't necessarily decide a champion on the field. We'll get to that. But how are you doing?
Doing great. It's been a great week. We've had a ton of sports already this week. I had my heart ripped out on that Monday night with a terrible week from Boswell and Waddle. So I am done with fantasy for the year. But other than that, man, hey, we're doing great.
Yeah, the Steelers got a big win on Monday night. And actually, I was thinking about it. I went into Monday night thinking, is there a better cold weather quarterback still active today than Josh Allen? And look, nobody's going to say I would take Aaron Rodgers in one game today in cold weather over Josh Allen. But one of the questions I am going to ask you when we get to the NFL part of this discussion is, who is the best cold weather quarterback today not named Josh Allen? And then when you think about the big cold weather quarterbacks of all time, the John Elways, the Brett Favres, the Tom Brady's, who is the best cold weather quarterback of all time? So we'll get to all that. But John, I couldn't help myself. I watched some bowl game today. I hate the Bulls. I'm excited for the Bulls to go away. It's part of my proposal, but I couldn't help myself but watch the IS4S Salute to Veterans Bowl. I actually had $20 down on Jacksonville State -3 and the under of 47. Final score, 17-13 Jacksonville State. Cha-ching.
That's a win.
So that's a win. Watched a little bit of NBA Cup. I'm curious. This was we had the Spurs and we had the Knicks in, I think, the third NBA Cup. And I think this is good for the NBA. It seems to matter to the players. I know when the NBA Cup qualifying games are happening and the floor changes, Michelle notices. So it definitely catches the casual fan's eye. But does it matter to you at all as a Blazer fan?
The Blazers actually had a pretty decent run in the NBA Cup. I believe they got out of the group phase and lost in the very first elimination round.
So it mattered enough.
It mattered enough for me to pay attention. But that's also because you and I had mystery tickets to go to a Blazers game that was dependent on the outcome of the NBA Cup. Now, one thing I want to say, the big change in broadcasting for the NBA Cup was Amazon throwing their hat in the ring and being the broadcast affiliate partner group via Prime, and they really raised the bar. I have to say, from the staff they put out there, not a bunch of old people, but a bunch of retired NBA players that are still young. Their visual broadcast and fidelity was great. The audio was great. I really enjoyed that. And it is cool to see how excited the players were, where, you look a couple years ago, LeBron was like, do we really have to put a banner up for the NBA Cup championship? It's come a long way. And I
was going to ask that, though. If the Blazers won one, you wouldn't put a banner up, would you? I wouldn't.
I mean, I don't think they have a choice, but no, I don't think it's one that, you're actually super proud of.
No. But then again, we have Hall of Fame banners for, announcers, so maybe we would put that up.
I mean, look, Bill Schonely is one of the greatest of all time, and he coined the name Rip City, so absolutely he deserves a banner.
I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm just saying, in the grand scheme of things, it's not just like they limit it to only players and championships. So maybe there is room for a midseason tournament banner. We did go see the Blazers on Sunday night, a Blazers team that's without all three of its point guards. Still no Matisse Thybulle, who is one of the best defenders in the entire league when he's healthy. The Blazers were 4.5-point underdogs. To the Warriors, but they beat the Warriors 136-131 in a game where Steph Curry had 12 threes and 48 points. Man, that was awesome to watch live.
Every time he grabbed the ball and put up a shot, it just looked effortless. You knew it was going in, and it was terrifying to watch that. The Blazers held a lead for, I believe, most of the game. They got off to a pretty hot start. their only 2-pointer, or their first 2-point shot came when they had scored 20 points, which I thought was just fascinating. And the modern NBA, that's just how it is nowadays, right? It's efficient 3-pointers, and it's dunks or it's layups. And it was great to see Shaden have another really sharp performance.
Huge.
And they battled.
He went for 30 plus.
He did. He had, I believe, 33.
He and Grant had 30 plus, which, when Steph Curry goes for 48, not just somebody has to do something special on the other team. Multiple people have to do something special, and they did.
It was a great game. Really exciting. A lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and I got to give credit too for all of the credit I give to the product on the floor. Credit to the Blazers organization for the presentation and the in-arena experience. I had Michelle, I had Hallie, I had Olivia. Varying degrees of basketball fandom among the three of them. Michelle being a pretty regular Blazers fan, tuning in on the NBA app and watching. Olivia and Hallie not really watching at all, but they were into it. And at the end, when we were all yelling defense, they were yelling defense. When the donuts fell from the sky, they were hoping to get one. Olivia actually got a t-shirt. The Dame Lillard glass that they made was really cool. You could send me a photo of that and we'll put a photo up in the comments. But yeah, a really well done night. And like you said, it was a mystery night when our buddy Eric, huge shout out to Eric and Isabella, the homies, for setting this all up. When they set it up, we didn't know what night it was going to be. We didn't know who the opponent was going to be, but boy, did we luck out.
Incredible experience. And yeah, that Damian Lillard glass is it's top class. It's a really cool one. They knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, definitely. So, John, before we get to the NFL, I want to talk about college football. Last week was a very turbulent and stormy week in the college football news cycle. Of course, it started with Notre Dame getting snubbed and then their AD, Pete Bevacqua, going on a rage tour and really embarrassing himself and putting a spotlight on the fact that Notre Dame, starting next year, had negotiated an automatic in if they get a top 12 ranking with the committee, which I think is a little bit ridiculous. Just join a committee or just join a conference, you guys. The biggest issue that we have with the college football playoff today is that it's not determined on the field. So I can understand where, Pete Bevacqua's point is, you're selecting between two resumes. And yes, there was this head-to-head in week one, but you made the wrong selection. Like, why do we leave it up to a selection committee? So last week, I intended to drop this piece that I call Uncle Denny's playoff model, or in short, the Uncle Denny model. But man, after the Pete Bevacqua stuff happened, it felt like the right time, and then the Sharon Moore news dropped. And then at the end of the week, Diego Pavia goes on this embarrassment tour after the Heisman Trophy presentation, and then as he is partying in a club that night holding a "Fuck Indiana" sign, which of course gets out on social media.
I think he wanted it to get out. Like,
he really wanted it to.
Thinking?
I know. And it's such a disappointment because he was arguably the most electric player in college football this year. But Fernando Mendoza had, I think, almost just the same number of yards. He had, I want to say, 10 more total touchdowns. And his team's the number one team in the country. There's something to that. And you can't be like, oh, well, he's playing for Alabama. He's playing for Indiana. He's playing for Indiana.
Ohio State, right? So, and that's the other thing. He had multiple big-time, big-game drives against top-flight competition. The question I have for you is, how much did this hurt Diego Pavia's draft stock?
I think enough to get him to the Raiders.
And that's probably because the Raiders are going to have a high draft pick, right?
Well, I don't even know if he'll be a first-round draft pick. I'll be really honest. I think he is one of those guys that plays so free and so loose, like a Johnny Manziel, but he doesn't have that same national backing of a Johnny Manziel that I will not be surprised if, like a Russell Wilson, he falls to the second or third round.
I think that's fair, and I think the Raiders are an organization that would take a shot on him. If the Browns hadn't drafted 2 quarterbacks last year, they might have taken a shot at him. But it is going to be interesting to see how the chips fall and what this is going to do when he goes on Gruden's QB camp and goes through those workouts and all of those interviews that are so important to getting drafted.
So we get to a new week, clear skies in terms of the news cycle, and it's time. It's time for the Uncle Denny model. And before we get into it, like anything, we have to note that people and organizations, they're all incentive-driven creatures. So if we're going to propose a new model for college football, we have to think about who the stakeholders are at the table here and what is going to incentivize them to say yes to something different from what they have right now. And I think there are four key stakeholders, John, or at least four key stakeholder groups. One of them, the first one, I'm kind of cheating a little bit. I'm bucketing together the NCAA, all of its media partners, and their ad buyers. And I think, to the surprise of absolutely no one, this stakeholder group is going to be persuaded by money, and really only money. So the more money we can generate, the more happy they are, the happier they are going to be. The second stakeholder group are the conferences, and specifically the Power Four conferences, especially the ACC and the Big 12. They're not just motivated by money, but they're motivated by what I would call equitable representation. Sure, like the Big Ten never wants to seem less than the SEC, but the ACC and the Big 12 never want to seem less than the SEC and the Big Ten. And then you have the reemergence of the Pac-12, which, look, I've joked about that this year as being the group of Power 4.5 conference, but realistically, it's a group of five conference. It's the Pac-12, the American, the Sun Belt, and I'm forgetting one. Maybe whatever happened with the Mountain West, if that's still a Mountain West. But regardless, the conferences care about money. So that's the first thing. Like, they've got to make more money in any change, but they've also got to make sure that they have a path to equitable representation. Then the third stakeholder group are the schools. I actually think the individual schools face the greatest complexity in the whole situation, where having your program reach the college football playoff not only translates to a huge financial windfall, but it creates tremendous momentum both in recruiting and in your general student body applications, which of course matters as schools are trying to grow and they need that income from tuition. But most universities don't have a seat at the table. Like, very few universities have the power of a Notre Dame. And I think it's telling that Notre Dame doesn't want to give up that power. The short answer is schools are incentivized by money, but really their focus needs to be on hiring the best coaches that can recruit the best players and win games on the field, and then trust the conferences to provide clear paths. And then finally, the players. I think the players, let's assume every player has two huge motivations. The first one is to win the games that are in front of them on the schedule, because winning generally translates to, number two, making it to the league and making money. And now it's not just making it to the league to make money, but making as much NIL money as you can, and then making it to the league and making more money as a professional. I think from a player perspective, more games is better. More playoff games is even better, because they are higher intensity, national TV spotlight. Like, they are a real chance to show off what you can do and increase your draft stock on
opportunities for exposure. If we look at college basketball, how many NBA players that were not even on radars had 3 electric games in the tournament and were all of a sudden on those NBA teams' radars? 100%.
Absolutely.
Just to throw it back at you, it sounds kind of to me like, if we're looking at a corporation, you're describing the revenue generation at that top level and that C-suite. You're describing departments and department heads when you're talking about conferences. You're talking about the middle managers when you're talking about the schools, and then you're talking about the workers at that lowest level. Just to kind of have
highly paid workers now.
Highly paid workers, yeah.
Yeah. And so what does this all amount to? Well, look, my proposal is that we move from a 12-team playoff to a 16-team playoff. We get rid of buys, and we break it down into 2 buckets. The first bucket is what I would call conference playoff berths. Of the 16 playoff berths, 11 would go to the conferences, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then 5 would go to wild cards, where we're going to have top-ranked teams playing across the country for those last 5 spots into the playoffs. playoff. Now, I think there are a lot of people out there that would say, why do we need a 16th team in? But I think when you look at the history of March Madness, whether it was George Mason in 2006 or VCU in 2011, or even Florida Atlantic as a 9 seed in 2023, we've seen plenty of teams that had to play their way in through the play-in into the 64-team bracket and then go on a deep run to the Final Four. It's happened time and time again, and I think one of the things that we've seen in college football is there's more parity than ever before, especially with the fact that every year, every player becomes a free agent again. And so I think that we have to be, more democratized with how we distribute these playoff berths. But at the same time, I think we need to recognize that the vast majority of teams that can actually win a championship are going to come from the Power Four conferences. And so we need to consolidate most all of those playoff berths in those 4 conferences.
The other thing that I'll say, and you're right, when they first introduced the concept of the first 4 in March Madness, I believe 2 of those games were 16 seeds. And yeah, those aren't going to amount to much. We've only ever seen 2 16 seeds ever beat a 1 seed. That didn't happen for the first time until about 5 years ago. But it was, I believe they're the 11 seeds that you really saw that come through. And I think we saw like 3 Final Four teams in the first 4 years of the first 4 come out of the first 4. And, at the end of the day, the old adage is, well, to be the best, you got to beat the best. Sure, when you're thinking about dynasties, to win a championship, you don't have to beat the best when there's this many teams in a bracket. They just have to get beat by somebody. Look at that Kentucky team that was loaded in, I believe, 2013. Absolutely. Duke didn't beat them. Wisconsin did, and then Duke beat Wisconsin.
And I would say college football, is even more matchup based than college basketball was or is, or really any other sport. I think with college football, the way styles and schemes, the way injuries play a factor in who you actually have on the field. So yeah, I mean, I think that, certainly a 15 or 16 seed can win. And when we get to how this year would have broken out, I think you would agree, at least in the first round, we would have had a bunch of exciting matchups. Now, this does mean we get rid of the bowl system, because I'm proposing that for every round up until the semifinals, the conference rounds, the wild cards, the CFP first round and second round, all of those are played on the home campuses of the higher seeded team. Or if that team should choose, they can play it in a big stadium nearby. Like if Vanderbilt gets in and they're like, our tiny stadium is not going to fit all the fans in Nashville that want to come, so we're going to go play in the Titan Stadium. Totally their choice. If Georgia wants to play in Atlanta, if LSU doesn't want to play in Death Valley and they want to go to New Orleans, they should be able to do that. But once you get to the semifinals, that's when we're going to use East Coast, West Coast. On the West Coast, we're going to have a rotation of Phoenix, of LA. I don't know if that's the Rose Bowl or if that's SoFi. It feels weird to go away from the Rose Bowl. But then again, UCLA is talking about building a new football stadium. So even they are thinking about going away from the Rose Bowl. And then Las Vegas. And then on the East Coast, you'd have the traditional rotation of Miami, New Orleans, and Atlanta. And then the national championship would be one of those cities, right? They can bid for it like they do today. And so the money continues to flow in like it does with the bowl system. When you think about all of the sponsors, guess what? All of these playoff games need sponsors. So don't tell me that getting rid of the bowl games is going to cost the NCAA money. It ain't. It's going to actually create more revenue opportunities and revenue opportunities that people actually want to pay a premium for. I'm sorry, but how many sponsors really want to pay for Jacksonville State to play tonight? They don't. They don't care about that game. But if they got a playoff game in the SEC for a spot in the playoff between Ole Miss and Texas A&M that doesn't exist today, that is real revenue generation. Real revenue generation. And as you're going to see, I have 7 of those games that don't exist today. So how will we dole these out? Well, it's going to start with the top 2 conferences. And I'm going to come to how we reevaluate this every 5 years, because we need to make sure that we, in the spirit of fairness, not equality, that we maintain this like equitable fairness over time. But it starts with the SEC and the Big Ten. I think everybody would agree today, those 2 conferences are a cut above. They get 3 guaranteed berths, the top 5 teams. And it's up to each conference to decide how their tiebreakers work. Because you look at the ACC this year and what happened with Duke. Doesn't Duke kind of have a legit argument for playing in the playoff? They did win the ACC. So the SEC and the Big Ten get 3 each. The 1 seed and the 2 seed play. And here's the deal. There's no bye. But the 1 seed and the 2 seed in every Power 4 conference gets a double elimination opportunity. If you lose the championship game, then you go to the next week to the play-in games. And that next week is when you have all of the conference play-in games and the wild card play-in games. So think about it. Right now we have Thanksgiving, we have rivalries. Then the week after Thanksgiving, we have conference championship weekend. And then we have nothing, right? We have Army-Navy. Instead of that, we would have the conference. After conference championships, you'd have conference and wild card play-ins. Then you'd go to the start of the college football playoffs. So yes, if you're one of those teams that has to start from the very back and make a miracle run all the way to the championship, you're talking about playing every week, and you're talking about 6 straight loser go home games in a row. But like, isn't that sports?
It's only one extra game.
It's really only one extra game, no break. And as you and I have talked about, last year when Oregon had 3 weeks off, we actually think that was to their detriment to have so much time to build up rust. So the Big Ten and the SEC get their 3 berths. Their 2 teams of the top 5 that don't make it can go into the wild card pool, and then they can have up to 3 additional teams qualify for wild card play-ins. And then the ACC and the Big 12 get 2 guaranteed berths. They have their top 3 teams qualify, and they have obviously their championship game, and then the loser will play the number 3, and then they can have up to 3 teams qualify for play-ins in the wild card. The group of 5 is going to get 1 guaranteed berth every year. Their top 2 champions, based on the AP rankings, will meet for their berth. And then 2 additional G5s can qualify based on AP ranking. So if you had a situation where there was a 3rd team, like you had 3 teams that were in the top 15, there's got to be a path for them. And let's face it, that's going to be so rare. And in those scenarios where the AP has actually made that decision, they know what they're doing, right? And then Notre Dame. We'll give Notre Dame an auto bid into a wild card play-in, not into the playoff itself, but into a wild card play-in, if they have a top 15 ranking. If you're top 15, then, I mean, you'd definitely be in there with the top 4 or 5 in the SEC or the Big Ten. Or
what would it take for them to have an auto bid? If they're the top team in the country, just play out that string. They go undefeated.
No,
they look
join
great.
the conference. This is my thing, John. They don't join a conference because they have such a lucrative TV deal with NBC that they want to keep it all to themselves. They're in the ACC in every other varsity sport, in every other Division I sport. They compete with an ACC badge on their chest. But Notre Dame football is different. Well, if you want to be different, you don't get to have your cake and eat it too. If you want to have all of the money, then you're going to have a harder road. If you want to join a conference and be like everybody else, then you don't have to worry about it. Win the conference.
Okay.
I mean, why should what is it about Notre Dame at this point that says they should be treated differently from everybody else?
Money.
Yeah, that's that's only for them, right? Like, that doesn't matter to anybody else. I think those days need to come to an end. And in the Uncle Denny model, they would. All right. So then we've got our wild card plans. We've got 10 teams to qualify for 5 playoff berths. We are going to look at the AP poll, and I want to take a moment to say, yes, this requires the Associated Press to step back and think about how they do the poll, make sure that every voter is taking this very seriously and is not just mindlessly, oh, that team won, move them up a couple spots. That team lost, move them down a couple spots. Like, actually look at these teams, think about the injury situations, have conversations. There is this thing called Discord. You guys can talk, and then actually like have an educated voter base that we can rely on to rank these teams. So we just go through the rankings and then through others receiving votes. And if you look at the model this year in the SEC, we would have had number 1 Georgia and number 2 Alabama. And then Alabama lost, so we would have had Alabama and number 5 Texas, and then Ole Miss and number 4 Texas A&M. In the Big Ten, Indiana and Ohio State, then Ohio State would have played Michigan again, and Oregon would have played USC again. In the ACC, Virginia and Duke. Duke beats Virginia. Virginia then goes and plays Miami. Miami has its path that it cried and cried and cried about. In the Big 12, Texas Tech beats BYU again. That's just the nature of the Big 12 this year. BYU then plays Utah in a rematch of that incredible Holy War game. And then in the group of 5, we would have had Tulane and James Madison. And that would have meant for the wild cards, we would have had, based on the rankings. And again, this is how the last AP poll turned out. But in this case, we would have needed another AP poll after Championship Sunday that was taken very seriously. But if we just used what they had, you would have had Texas A&M playing Georgia Tech. You would have had Oklahoma playing Arizona, a rising Arizona team. You would have had Notre Dame playing Virginia, Texas playing Michigan, and Utah playing USC. If you assume all those home teams won, our 16-team playoff bracket would have been Indiana and Tulane, Ohio State and Duke. I think we can agree the top 2 seeds would have won easily there. Georgia and Utah. I think Utah, Utah plays really good defense. Kyle Whittingham on his way out. That could have been interesting. Texas Tech and Texas in an old Big 12 Southwest Conference battle. How about Oregon and BYU? Ole Miss and Alabama? Texas A&M and Miami? Oklahoma and Notre Dame? That's just the first round. And I think, again, you're talking about just in the conference and wild card, 7 more games. And then you're talking about 4 more games in the playoffs. That's a lot of money to be made for all of those stakeholders.
High profile matchups. It reminds me a lot of kind of some of those incredible week 1 matchups that we used to get back when teams had to have an incredible resume, not just to make a 4-team playoff, but to make the BCS championship game. And yeah, people would tune in for that, especially after a 14-week road to get there.
Now, the beauty of this is that we solved the biggest problem with college football playoff today, which is that we have a selection committee deciding who actually gets in, because now all of the entries are earned on the field. But once you get them in, you do have to seed them. And so I do think you need to have a seeding committee. And I mentioned, I failed to mention how we make sure that the conferences are kept equitable. And so I was going to say every 4 years, we're going to look at 3 KPIs on a weighted average. The first one is non-conference regular season performance, where the Power 4 non-conference wins per capita is going to be 50% of your score. Every Power 4 team is going to be required to play another Power 4 team in non-conference. Otherwise, you are not eligible for the postseason. And then we'll look at, okay, now that everybody's playing everybody and adjusting per capita for the fact that not every conference has the same number of teams, how are y'all doing? And there's going to be a little bit of strategery in there with how teams schedule across conferences. But, if everybody has to play everybody, everybody's got to fill dates. And we're either going to end up with all blowouts or we're going to end up with some really competitive matchups. The second KPI is what I would call college football playoff performance raw. This is total number of college football playoff per Power 4 conference. College football playoff wins per Power 4 conference. I can say that. Just raw, right? If you have a couple of teams that really show out and the ACC goes on a tear, that should matter. But then I would say that's 30% of it. The last 20% is adjusted. So I would say just look at the winning percentage, right? Because again, you're not going to have the same number of entries, and so winning percentage matters. And then by aggregating those 3 scores, we can see, who are our top 2 conferences? And every 4 years, the top 2 conferences get 3 guaranteed seeds, and that can change. But, like Champions League, it can adjust, but you've got 4 years to earn it. And then if you don't get what you want, you got another 4 years to earn something better.
Yeah, I think there's already precedent for that in major sports leagues that have similar structures to college football. So that makes sense. I'm aligned with that.
All right. So finally, how are we going to put together a seeding committee that's going to do its best job? And I will say, there's no perfect here, right? As we know, the reality is once you're in the tournament, it's kind of hard to be bitching about seeding. If you're a 9 or a 10 seed, which means you got left out of having a first round playoff game, I'm sorry, play better, buck up, Bronco. You left plenty of it out on the field that you could have played better, won a game that you didn't win, and not be in that situation. So do better next year. But what I would do is I would break it into 3 constituencies. First, I would have conference reps, and I would have a 16-person committee for seeding. 7 of those people would be conference reps, 1 each from the SEC, Big 10, ACC, Big 12, Pac 12, American, and Sun Belt. They would be appointed by the conference commissioner, who can either appoint themselves, a conference official, or an official from a constituent school, though no single person can serve for more than 2 consecutive years or 3 years in a 10-year period. Got to have fresh faces. The second constituency are the coaches. Hey, they're on the field. They're seeing the players up close and personal. So Power 4 and Group of 5 coaches are all eligible, conducted in partnership with the coaches poll. So it's a vote, vote for nominations. Coaches with teams in the college football playoff field, though, excluded from consideration, of course. A coach can decline their nomination, but they cannot reassign it to another person. And a coach cannot serve in consecutive years, nor can they serve more than 2 years in a 10-year period. There are a lot of, brilliant minds in coaching. This is like a public service. And then finally, the group that I think will be most excited about this are the analysts and the writers. I think 4 analysts and writers should be in the room. They see the game from a different lens, but their lens is very important too. So I think that is also a nomination process. You do that in partnership with the Football Writers Association of America. All media formats are eligible. So whether you are podcasting, doing streaming video on demand, whether you are writing a column or a blog, or you still write a newspaper article that gets printed somewhere in the world, you should be eligible for this. And similarly, if you don't want it, you can decline your nomination, but you can't reassign it, and you can't serve more than 2 consecutive years or 3 years in a 10-year period. What do you think of this approach to a seating committee?
I think it makes a lot of sense. You're getting viewpoints from different elements of the game, but it does require people to pay attention in a way that a lot of them don't. You look at coaches and how many coaches are watching film that they're not playing against, so it requires a bit of catch up. I love the journalist perspective and having that be a rotating cast. I believe, journalists get votes for the NFL MVP every year. And this is, again, a precedent-driven structure that we've seen works. And, however you feel about the MVP race last year, I believe they got it right with Josh Allen. We haven't had wild cards or things out of left field, and it's made sense in a big way. And I love last point. I love the idea that, you're not just going to do this for 20 years straight. We need new people.
Why would we build in stagnation? I think it's time for a new model. And for there to be a new model, it's got to make sense for all the parties. And I think, when you go back to those 4 constituencies, those stakeholders at the table, I think it makes sense for the NCAA and its partners. I think it makes sense for the conferences. It makes sense for the schools. Certainly makes sense for the players. And to quote the great Michael Scott, ultimately, the Uncle Denny model is a win-win-win. We all win. I also win for having negotiated this incredible path forward for college football. All right, John, let's finally, 30 minutes in, thank you for sticking with me, turn our attention to the NFL. And the first question I want to ask you is a question that everybody's asking this week, but I want to ask it from a different lens. The Kansas City dynasty is over, 7 straight AFC championships, a bunch of Super Bowls, Patrick Mahomes challenging Tom Brady for potentially being Tom Brady and Joe Montana, who is my GOAT quarterback, but for being the greatest of all time at quarterback. Is Kansas City going to come back and make the playoffs next year? Is the dynasty really done? Because if Kansas City comes back and they go to another AFC championship game next year, and then they make the playoffs the year after that, knowing that this requires Patrick Mahomes to bounce back quickly from a torn ACL and LCL. It was one of the other CLs, but he got to repair
both legs. That was the problem.
He was
ACL in one leg, LCL the other. I'm sorry, Patrick Mahomes is 30. Who is saying the Kansas City dynasty is done? Because if you want to say that
everybody,
I'm sorry, everybody is wrong.
You don't seem sorry, John.
No, because look at it. Did we just say the Pats dynasty was done after Tom Brady tore his ACL to open up the 2009 year? And then it was like, well, that's it for the Pats. I guess they're over. No, what did they do for the next 10 years? I'm sorry, they won 3 more Super Bowls? Was it 4 more? And they made a bunch of AFC championship games? I almost feel like the Chiefs needed this as a moment to reflect and reset because their offensive structure has become stagnant. And I love Andy Reid, now that he has to take a good long look in the mirror and actually reflect on what he needs to change about his team. Travis Kelce needs to just go be a trophy husband now and enjoy life being married to a billionaire, and good for him.
Like pre-post Aaron Hernandez for Tom Brady.
That wasn't. Yeah, I mean, kind of. That was a big
Different
reset.
reason for
Yeah,
leaving the team,
but in a big way, like they have a decent young core. When you look at Xavier Worthy, when you look at Rashee Rice, as long as you keep his keys away from him. But they need to figure out a ground game. They need to figure out how they're going to retool the defense, because Chris Jones, he showed up in a couple games this year, but he has not been consistent. And that Spags defense has not been the Spags defense of old. So I'm sorry, until I see this like 3 years in a row, this is a bump in the road. This Chiefs dynasty is not over. Andy Reid's not going anywhere. He's not like a Tom Coughlin or a Pete Carroll where he's old and it's waiting for him to go out.
I mean, he is old though. He is, I want to say he's 70 or 68, something like that. He is getting older, and the man is not exactly
he is 67. Okay, touche.
Not exactly
touche.
The picture of health.
He has enjoyed his time. He has enjoyed his time eating Kansas City barbecue. You are not wrong.
Absolutely. And Philly cheesesteaks before that. I mean, the man's arteries have been fighting an uphill battle for decades.
But when you have Pat Mahomes, and yes, he had a catastrophic knee injury, but what we're hearing is the damage is not as bad as it could have been. And ACLs, they repair a lot faster than they did 10, 15 years ago. So we'll see what kind of Pat Mahomes we get come September. I'm not putting nails in the coffin yet. I am not going to say they're done.
I agree with you. I think Travis Kelce is done. I think he will retire, and I think that will give them an opportunity to go get some fresh blood in there. We know that a game-changing tight end can be what a team needs to really level up. And we've seen a bunch of them come into the league lately. It's been one of the real kind of trends over the last few years, is these big athletic tight ends that can not just block, but they can get out in space and they can make big plays.
The game's changed. Now, the only thing that I will call out and kind of play devil's advocate with myself is, hey, when Brady had his bump in the road in 2009, you looked around and the only reason they lost that division was because of the advent of the wild card. It wasn't like Miami leveled up in a huge way. Buffalo was still middling. And, the Jets had a few good years in there as wild card teams, but there was no real surge from any AFC East contender. Very different in the AFC West right now, where, the Raiders are still a doormat and Pete Carroll hasn't worked out, and he's probably out the door after this year. But hey, what Sean Payton is building in Denver, it feels very similar to me as Oklahoma City 2 years ago when they had the 1 seed. They're ahead of schedule, and things are starting to work for Bo Nix. Their defense is nasty. He's kind of rounding into his own ground game, but really it's Jim Harbaugh's the one I would be absolutely terrified of, because we have seen what that man does when he has a few years to build a team. Justin Herbert, if he could get some freaking protection, he's a monster, and he's an Iron Man. And boy, that is a team that is going to push everybody in their division every single week in and week out. Could be even this year.
John, I want to come back to the Broncos because I agree with you. What they've done has been incredible, but I actually want to come through the front door first and ask the question of who had the best win of the week, because you could argue it was the Chargers in going into Kansas City if there was ever a kitchen sink game. It was that game in Kansas City with their backs completely up against a wall, hanging by a thread to their playoff hopes. And then the Chargers go in and win that game and continue on their own march to the playoffs. I think they've won 5 out of 6 now, and that only loss was that, absolute decimation in Jacksonville. So was it the Chargers or was it the Broncos who hosted the Packers and Bo Nix throws for 4 touchdowns. The Denver defense makes multiple stops in the fourth quarter as the Packers are desperately trying to win that game. And, I think for me, I was going to come to the Broncos first through the power rankings. I posted new power rankings last week, and I had the Seahawks in the top tier of those 4 teams that have really looked like they could legitimately win the Super Bowl. And I had Denver in the second tier. And I'll tell you, after Sunday, both the way the Seahawks played at home against Indianapolis and what we saw from Denver hosting Green Bay, I think I got those two flipped. And I think Seattle's actually the fringe Super Bowl contender, and Denver is the legit and undisputed kind of 1 seed right now in the AFC.
I'm very worried about tomorrow's game for Seattle, and I know that we'll talk about them. That offense just doesn't look right, and I think you're right. That's going to have to be a playoff run carried by their defense, but Denver silenced a lot of doubters, and yeah, there were some injuries from the Packers. Losing Christian Watson is huge. Obviously, losing Micah Parsons late in that game
huge
is
torn ACL,
massive.
done for the year.
He's done for the year, and that opened things up. But
transform that defense.
The Broncos were down in that game to start, if I recall correctly, and Bo Nix threw 4 touchdowns, put the team on his back, and really made it happen. It wasn't like the defense just pitched a shutout. Bo, I believe they were. I think they were tied 21-21, or they were down 20-21 at one point, but it wasn't a cakewalk, and they had to put the team on their back. And you mentioned biggest win of the week. My gut reaction was neither of these teams, but as we talk through it, I think it is a 1A for the Broncos and then a 1B for the Bills.
And, honorable mention to the Rams, who beat the Lions, and they had to come back themselves. They put up 20 consecutive points to go from 10 down to 10 up on the Lions, and then never gave that lead back. I mean, it was really a week where the top teams put their foot down. And, you saw that with the Jaguars, who put up 48 on the Jets. You saw that with the Texans, who put a 40 spot on the Cardinals. And in the midst of all that, we saw some surprises like Tyler Shuck and the Saints finding a way to win again and getting to 4-10 and beating the Panthers at home 2017. There's all these little surprises that are still going to make you go, huh? The Bills coming back from a 24-7 halftime deficit, 21-0 to start the game, and winning in New England to get 1 game away from that AFC East lead. I mean, John, how about the Ravens shutting out Joe Burrow and the Bengals? I know no T. Higgins, but Joe Burrow and the Bengals at home. I mean, if that was all the Bengals could muster with Joe Burrow, why'd he come back?
Well, to be fair, they moved the ball really well. The Bengals had 40 minutes of time of possession.
Did they really?
They had 40 minutes. They moved the ball. The problem was that pick 6 in the red zone, where it could have, I believe, cut the lead to 7-17. Which great handoff by the defensive player. I believe it was Kyle Van Noy who realized he can't run that fast, and he looked behind him and handed the ball to a much faster Ravens defender who just bolted down the sideline, scored a pick 6. And then Burrow threw another pick on the next drive, and it was brutal. But good on the Ravens. They're keeping pace with the Steelers. This is going to come down to it for both teams to not drop the ball. Neither team wants to win the NFC South, it appears, and yet the Saints are right there, and maybe if they had moved to Tyler Shuck earlier in the year, they'd be right there in contention.
Yeah, no kidding. And speaking of contention, we have 2 teams that have clinched playoff berths, 1 in each conference. You have Denver in the AFC and you have the Rams in the NFC. And then we saw not just Kansas City, but Miami was officially eliminated. The Bengals were officially eliminated. So now there are 9 teams alive in the AFC. You have Houston in the 7th seed right now. And then on the outside looking in, 8-6 Indianapolis and 7-7 Baltimore. So I think to your point, Baltimore needs to catch Pittsburgh to make the playoffs. I think for Indianapolis, all the credit in the world to what Phil Rivers did, but we've talked about that closing schedule. It is absolutely brutal, and I don't think they're better than Houston or Jacksonville. So the question is going to be, can Houston catch Jacksonville? And we can talk about that more in a minute. But you've got Buffalo as the 6th seed, which again, Buffalo is 10-4. New England is 11-3. There's a world where Buffalo wins out and New England stumbles and Buffalo gets the AFC East title. I don't see it happening at this point, but I think, when you look at the division records, it's going to require New England to lose again in the division.
And they do have 1 game against the Jets, and I believe they close against the Dolphins. But does anybody really believe they're going to lose to the Jets? No. The Dolphins are moving away from Tua is what the reports are. But I will say, weird things happen in Week 18. I will also say the Dolphins are actually playing pretty hard for Mike McDaniels. If they had a competent quarterback in that game, I was screaming at my TV, Tua, just do something.
Yep.
very frustrating. They might have done a better job against the Steelers. It's not like the Steelers lit the world on fire.
No, but I do think, just if you're going to map it out and simulate it 100 times, I think 95 times this is going to go New England's way, and they're going to
pencil in the Pats as the 2 seed, 100%.
And then it really comes down to Jacksonville. Like I said, Jacksonville and Houston, and then Pittsburgh, because I think the Chargers at 10-4, they may jockey with Buffalo for the 5 or the 6 seed, but I don't see the Chargers falling out at this point. Even after the Chargers and the San Francisco 49ers, those two California teams, they have been through so much this year, and yet they are still right in the thick of the playoff race.
100%. The Chargers are getting a Cowboys team that I don't know what their morale is going to be this upcoming Sunday. Having been eliminated from the playoffs, there's nothing left for them. They fought their hearts out down the stretch. And, if their offense had been clicking a little bit earlier in the season and their defense had been just a little bit better, they might have actually charged for it. But that's a tough one. I firmly believe in the Chargers. I think it's going to come down to, the Ravens and the Steelers. One of those teams has to win the AFC North. The other's going to fall out. And wouldn't it be an interesting first round matchup if the Bills traveled to Baltimore to have kind of a rematch of that week 1 game where we saw the first of many weeks of Josh Allen magic? And then for the Jags, I think the Jags are going to make the playoffs. I think they'll be in as a wild card if they lose.
It'd be hard for them not to at this point.
It would, especially because I believe they get the Colts and the Titans to close after this weekend. Now, when it comes to the AFC South, it really does come down to this weekend for the Jags. I pencil them in with a win against the Colts, even though the Colts that'll be a kitchen sink game for the Colts. And then they finish against the Titans, which Cam Ward's been balling out, but they just don't have the talent. It's really going to come down to this weekend against the Broncos. If the Jags can win against the Broncos, it is their division to lose. But if they get beat by the Broncos, who are going to be playing to stay ahead of the Pats, Houston has their own destiny in their own hands, closing with a relatively favorable schedule. I believe it's Raiders, it's Colts, and that other team is the Chargers, which,
that will be a really tough week. But the Chargers may also be locked into their destiny at that point, and with all of the injuries that they've faced and knowing that they're going to have to play a wild card game, they may be very happy to not play their starters in week 8.
I gave those to you out of order, though. Raiders, Chargers, Colts is how the Texans finish.
Okay. Well, the Colts, too. I mean, the Colts could very well be out of it. But, the Chargers are going to play them tough. But they've got to win that one.
I also don't think the Chargers can beat the Texans. Like, that defense is going to be hammering.
It's two very similar teams, two very similar offenses. But I think the Houston defense is just a cut above. So, we'll see. But I think, what's interesting to me in the NFC, let's start with the 2 seed. Chicago is back in the 2 seed at 10-4. They're back in pole position in the NFC North. That is not what we expected after Green Bay beat Chicago, beat them by a touchdown, just covered the 6.5 point spread. But it felt like Green Bay controlled that game for the most part. Chicago couldn't get their running game going like they had been. Obviously, no Roma Dunze in that game, and so that was a big hit to the Chicago passing game. But Chicago's back in pole position with Green Bay losing at Denver, and now that Green Bay is a half game back, you have Green Bay in the 7th seed, and then Detroit in the 8th seed, a half game back of Green Bay.
Caleb Williams balled out in that second half to close that game out, and I think that moral victories don't mean much, especially in the NFL. You either get a win or you get a loss. In some cases, a tie. Just ask the Cowboys and the Packers about that. But going from contending with the Packers to then balling out against a very stout Browns defense, and hey, good on Myles Garrett. He got 2 sacks on Caleb. He's 1 away from the record. He's not even going to need 16 games at this rate. And I love that for Myles Garrett, that poor guy. He and Max Crosby, I hope they get paid with Brinks trucks or they get to go contend somewhere. But I think this is going to be a huge one. And hey, it's not the same Green Bay team. It's going to be in a raucous Soldier Field. I mean,
That's what I was going to say.
This is for legitimacy.
Yeah, no Micah Parsons. It's going to be probably the most rabid Bears crowd in 20 years. Obviously no Aaron Rodgers for a couple of years, but those wounds, man, they're deep. Those scars, they feel them. And Chicago is going to be throwing everything at winning this game. I think there's a very good chance Green Bay loses this game, and all of a sudden Detroit gets pulled right back into contention. And they need that after their loss at LA last week. I mean, that was a really tough loss, dropping them to 8-6. And, for their own schedule, at 8-6, they have to close Pittsburgh, at Minnesota, at Chicago. So, they're going to have to face Chicago too, though they may be much more fortunate than Green Bay, and Chicago may have locked up the NFC North by then.
100%. That's where my brain was going too, is that may be a rest your guys game for Chicago, or it's a, hey, if you're Chicago, do you want to try and pick your poison? Although Detroit laid a 50 burger on Chicago. I went back and looked. I believe it's the only 50 burger we've seen all year. That was at Detroit, I believe.
52-21.
Yeah.
Stomped
them. Just obliterated them. But to be fair, that was a different Chicago team. That was week 2 for Ben Johnson. They had just gotten beat by the Vikings the week earlier after a game that they handled 3 quarters and then gave it away to J.J. McCarthy. Yep. So this could be very bad for the Packers. This could be, a gift to the Lions and letting them in as the 7th seed if we get to that point.
Yeah. John, last 2 points before we get into this week's slate. Fred Warner might be back for the playoffs. How much scarier does that make the 49ers?
What percentage of Fred Warner makes an impact? Because
70.
I just don't think we get 70% of Fred Warner. I know that this is fun to talk about. It's fun to,
he's so incredible.
He is, and he's got the mind, but the injury he had, I mean, he had a dislocated ankle. It took over a year for Chris Godwin to come back from that. A very similar injury. Like, I love that we can joke about it. It means Fred Warner's going to be back next year, and that level of football IQ deserves to be on the field. I just don't think it's a real legitimate opportunity. But if he comes back in, and it's Kyle Shanahan, man, he's going to know how to do. He's going to know what level of Fred Warner he's got. He's going to know how to play him, what packages to deploy him in. And look, when Robert Saleh got let go from the Jets, the only thing I was praying for was, please don't let him go back to the Niners and continue terrorizing this division. And where the hell did the guy go?
Right back. Yeah, so John, last question, and I agree with you, although I do think we're going to get Fred back, and I do think he'll be 70%, and I do think that makes the Niners much scarier in the playoffs. If you had to bet $1,000 right now on the Buccaneers or the Panthers, knowing these two teams play twice in the last 3 games of the year, who gets your money?
That's a really tough one. I'm leaning towards the Panthers because I just can't believe the Bucs psychologically are still there. I think Todd Bowles has flamed his players very publicly, and even if it's the players' fault, and even if they need to hold each other accountable, you don't say that to the media. You don't say that in a press conference. That is doing a bad job coaching. And also, I'm sorry, but you're supposed to be this defensive mastermind of a coach. The defense has been a big part of the problem here, giving up massive leads. You had Mike Evans come back and put up a masterpiece, and he's like screaming about a 3rd and 28. And then I believe it was a 4th and 17 on that last drive with the Falcons. How is this team going to get their heads right and come back? Whereas, yeah, the Panthers have had some missteps, but that's just been their MO all year.
You know, right?
If
and
Rico's
then bounce
running,
back.
Yeah, if Rico's running
I have
hard,
a feeling
they'll be fine.
They lost to the Saints, and they're going to bounce back this week. And I tend to think it's going to be somehow, some way, the Panthers are going to win this division. And we're going to look back, and one of the storylines this year is going to be, Can you believe that the Bucks for the first 7, 8 weeks of the year looked as good as any team in the league, and we thought Baker Mayfield legitimately was an MVP candidate?
I was getting drinks with one of my best friends who is a Bucks fan, despite I don't think he's ever visited the East Coast. I think he's been to Kentucky a couple times, but he was lamenting after that Seahawks game. They were top 3 in the power rankings. They were broadcasted as a Super Bowl favorite. And they've had some injuries. It hasn't just been the injuries that's brought them back to earth. And to be fair, we look at those first 3 games, they were really tight games. A lot of them were those coin flip games that came down to a final possession and a final drive. But still, the narrative was that this is a different Baker team and that this is a team full of weapons, especially with the emergence of Egbuka, who, I don't know what happened, but he got a case of the dropsies. And he's had multiple high-profile drops in bad situations.
Big time. Big time. Yeah. And look, they have the talent. And Mike Evans is back. That's the most loaded receiving room in the entire league between Evans and Godwin and Jaden McMillan and Emeka Egbuka and Tez Johnson. I mean, there's a lot of talent in that room, but Baker's got to get it to them, and he's got to get it to them more consistently. He's got his running back repertoire back behind him with Bucky back in the fold. So, let's see. He's got to do it. But look, this week doesn't start with Carolina and with Tampa Bay. It starts with the Rams visiting our beloved Seattle Seahawks tomorrow or Thursday night, 2 nights from now. It's Tuesday night right now. Right now, the Rams are a 1.5 point favorite. It opened up Seahawks 1.5. It flipped to Rams, the traditional pick'em zone. The Rams may be without Devontae Adams. He's questionable, but that's the only real injury of note. And the Seahawks may be without left tackle Charles Cross. He is also questionable with a hamstring injury. But otherwise, these teams are going to be pretty healthy. Which way do you fall on Rams Seahawks on Thursday night?
This offense hasn't looked right. They have not been able to get the running game going. Sam just doesn't look like himself. But you've got Puka out there on the Pat McAfee show throwing shade, talking about, he's going to be seeing ghosts out there. And that's just billboard material, and you don't give billboard material if you don't have to. Devontae Adams is an Iron Man. He's been injured like multiple times this year where it looks like, oh man, he's going to miss a few weeks. And then he shows up and scores a touchdown in 80 yards.
Puka, just being out there is huge for them because he's such a threat. You have to take him seriously if he's on the field.
And then they've had a huge upswing from Blake Corum down the stretch where you don't even have to rely on Kyron Williams, and they're getting that change of pace back out of Corum. I don't understand how the spread's not higher. I don't see what I'm missing. I don't understand how the Hawks started as a 1.5 point favorite. I'm leaning towards the Rams here, and this is going to be a huge gut punch for the 12s. And I say that bracing myself. I have bets with friends on this. No money involved, but we have our own form of currency, and boy, I am not looking forward to that Thursday night.
Yeah, I wouldn't if I was you either. I also, if I had to go one way or the other, and we do because we make picks on this show, I'm going to go Rams -1.5. Like the Matt Stafford and the Rams offense has put up points on everybody. And when I look at Detroit's a very talented offense that was able to score, but not enough. It's a much more talented offense than the Seattle offense. Let's be really honest. If you look at the Detroit defense, it's not performing as well as Seattle, but it has a lot of talent on it. And the Rams did to Detroit what they've done to so many teams this year, putting up 41 points, and Puka went for almost 200 yards. And as a Puka fantasy owner, I thank him. Did take a couple of big shots, which he is wont to do these days, but he got back up, and he's not even on the injury report. So I hate to say it, and I hope we're wrong, but I'm going Rams -1.5 this week in really putting a stranglehold on the 1 seed in the NFC.
I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think the Seahawks defense will do an admirable job and keep this one close. I just don't think Darnold is going to be able to get it done. He's really struggled to find anybody but JSN this year, and no Torrey Horton to come onto the field. Shaheed just hasn't found that connection yet. And Cooper Kupp is still looking like Pooper Kupp.
Indeed, he is looking more like a tight end than he is a wide receiver these days. Speaking of blowouts, we have the Eagles and the Commanders on Saturday. So that's kind of our doo-doo game of the week.
We also have college football, so thank God we've got real football to watch.
Why do they feel like they had to compete with college football playoff Saturday opening round? I don't really understand that. But we have at 2 p.m. on Fox, Eagles Commanders. The Eagles just destroyed the Raiders. 31-0 shutout. Yeah. They're only 6.5-point favorites over a Commanders team that's getting smacked by everybody. Jaden Daniels is done for the year. What the heck am I missing here?
Really good question, because the Eagles needed that get-right game to get their confidence back up, to figure out what's working, what's not. I think the Commanders are almost another get-right game for them before they have to go and face the Bills in Week 17, and that is going to have some stakes when it comes to seeding. Sure, they've locked up the division, but they don't want to drop to the 4 seed and have to face the Seahawks.
No. I just think 6.5 points just feels too low. I would have thought this would have been an 8.5 or a 9.5, assuming a double-digit win. I still think they're going to win by double digits. I don't see any way that this game isn't like a 24-10, 27-13 type game. So I think the Eagles are going to roll. Although, the spread says that's what they want you to think. That's what they want you to bet. And so maybe the Commanders show up. And as much as I love Marcus Mariota, I just don't see that happening. Then we get Packers and Bears. We talked about that game a little bit. The Packers going into an incredibly hostile environment in Soldier Field. It's going to be a 7:20 local time kickoff in Chicago. It's going to be really freaking cold. Right now, the temperature in Chicago, let's see, it's looking like really cold. Doesn't say. Normally, let's see. Normally they've got, I guess it's not close enough for it to show what the weather is going to be, but suffice to say, I expect that it's going to be, game information. Dang it. I think I had it. It's going to be 37 degrees at kickoff in Chicago.
Yeah, so what's the wind chill? Because you got to remember, you got the lake effect.
Exactly. That is going to be a brutal game. And as we have been discussing, Green Bay is going to be out without their most important player, the star of their defense, Micah Parsons. The spread right now, it opened up Green Bay -3, and it's moved down to Green Bay -1.5. So the money that's coming in is all coming in Bears. And I got to say, I wish I could have gotten it +3. +3 at home, I think it is going to be a field goal game, and I think it's going to be a field goal game. The Bears win.
I want to believe in Chicago so bad. I have really enjoyed watching them on the upswing. I think this is a game where Caleb has a little bit more time. Without Micah Parsons, they should be able to get the run game going a little bit more. Who knows if Rome's going to be back this week, but like we've talked about week in and week out, they've gotten really great production from their rookie pass catchers this year. Give me the Bears.
Yeah, I like that. All right, so then we roll into Sunday, and leading the morning slate, we have the Bills going against Shedeur Sanders and the Browns. The Bills are very understandably 10-point favorites in this game. I don't see any way not to pick the Bills here. I think Miles will get his sack on Josh Allen.
I think he gets 2.
Probably get 2, yeah, but I don't think it'll – I think this is going to be one of those games where the Browns are just totally overmatched. And we've seen this with the Bills' defense, where – they've had moments against really good teams where we're like, oh man, that did not look like the best version of the Bills defense. But when they played fairly crappy teams, for the most part, setting aside whatever happened down in Miami, they've looked pretty good. And I think Shedeur has little to no chance against this Bills defense.
I think they'll score some points, but ultimately...
Like how many? If I told you the over-under on Browns...
17 is my ceiling. My ceiling
okay.
In a blowout where the Bills scored 40.
How about we make a steak dinner bet, and I will give you over-under... I'm going to set the number at 13.5 points.
I'm taking the under. Yeah, gun to
Okay.
my head. 13 feels right. A touchdown and a couple field goals. Touchdown off one big Keyshawn Judkins run, and then Sanders has 2 picks, 3 sacks, maybe a fumble.
Well, I was hoping you'd go over there. I should have gone to 12 and a half. But let's see who wins this dinner. We'll keep everybody in the loop on that. All right, next up. So we both got the Bills.
Yeah.
All right, next up we have the Chargers. The Chargers are visiting Jerry World and the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas is a 1.5-point favorite here. Not technically out of contention yet, but they will be if they lose this game, or if Philadelphia wins. Do you like Dallas minus 1.5 at home, or do you like the Chargers on the road?
I get where the spread's coming from. I know that Vegas is like, hey, we just want 50% on each side so that we get the rake in the middle. But, this is a super explosive offense from Dallas if they do show up. Although George Pickens kind of looks like he just hasn't been there the last few weeks. It's a defense that can get after you. And when your offensive line is decimated like the Chargers is, they should have some lapses in protection for Justin Herbert. But I'm sorry, I'm not betting against Harbaugh right now.
This is the kind of game that he wins. Yes.
Yeah.
I will be very surprised if they lose this game. I will be more surprised if they lose this game than I was when they got blown out in Jacksonville.
100%.
And I think, my sense of Jacksonville was a little lower at that time than it is now. But I think with the Cowboys, we know what the Cowboys are. They know what the Cowboys are. And the Chargers are a defense-led team. We like to think about Justin Herbert in the running game. And we like to think about Keenan Allen. And they didn't even have Quentin Johnson last week. They are a defense-led team. And they're going to go into Dallas. I think they're going to take Javonte Williams away for the most part. And I think they're going to make CeeDee Lamb beat them. I think they're going to take George Pickens out of it, which has not been the hardest thing to do lately, and make them very one-dimensional. And I think they're going to be able to get that done. Again, the spread seems a little fishy to me. I would not have been surprised if this was -2 or -2.5 in favor of the Chargers. But we'll back the Chargers in this one. All right, this is a meaningless game. Our first game in the post-Mahomes era. We've got temporary post-Mahomes era. It's like an interlude. But we have the Kansas City Chiefs 3.5-point favorites with Gardner Minshew at Cam Ward and the Titans. Just how far does this Chiefs team fall with Gardner Minshew?
Offensively, I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball at all. They have to play. It's still an NFL defense, right? It's the Titans. They're not great, but they're still an NFL defense.
And their offense has been getting better.
It absolutely has been. And like we talked about, this is not a Spags defense of old, but it is still a Spags defense. I don't think this is going to be a walk in the park for Cam Ward. This feels to me almost like a coin flip. I'm going to take the team that has a starting quarterback and not one that's played for 3 different teams in 3 years. So give me the Titans here.
Do you think the Titans could actually win this game? They're plus 164 on the money line.
Gardner Minshew would have to have an absolutely horrendous day, which he could. This could be a game where the Chiefs put up 9 points on 3 field goals because Gardner can't hit Rashee Rice, can't hit Xavier Worthy. Isaac Pacheco can't get anything going on the ground. It could be a struggle because Pat Mahomes has been the lifeblood and the beating engine of this team with his legs, finding a way to get the ball to his receivers and making just incredible plays, even in his losses.
Yeah, I agree. I think, though, this Kansas City team has been so used to winning and having everything to play for that now that they don't, it's going to be sort of like the Arizona situation on steroids. And I think a lot of them are going to lean back a little bit. And so I actually like Tennessee plus 3.5, but more than I like Tennessee plus 3.5. You could adjust the game line on DraftKings and you could go Tennessee minus 2.5 and get them plus 184. And I think Tennessee, if they're going to win, I think they're going to win by a field goal. And if you want to get really aggressive and say the Titans are going to win by a touchdown, you get them almost 4-1 at plus 389. I definitely think there's a world where the Titans win this game 24-17. So that's where I think the value is. But either way, I'm with you. I'm going to take the Titans plus 3.5. All right, we've got another meaningless game to follow this one. The Cincinnati Bengals and the Miami Dolphins. Truly meaningless. Both teams eliminated. What do you think the spread is on this game? Cincinnati at
It's
Miami.
in Miami,
Mm-hmm.
probably Cincinnati minus 1.5.
Cincinnati minus 2.5. Good guess.
Okay. What? Does either team care? Like that's
I know,
I
right? We
think.
know Joe Burrow doesn't at this point. He's made it very clear that he has zero F's to give.
Do we know who the starting quarterback for the Dolphins is going to be? Who's their backup?
I don't know.
Is it still Sky Moore?
I mean, that name sounds so old that it can't be Sky Moore. It looks like it's Quinn Ewers,
Yeah,
the
man.
Texas rookie.
Is
Yikes. I mean, that's not the way to
is
go.
that really better than Tua? Yeesh.
I don't think it is, honestly. Especially at home.
I mean, I have
You
to
know.
take the talent, right? Like Joe Burrow still wants to finish the season strong. He wants to get his
You would think.
offensive rhythm back going into the offseason and figuring out, what's working and what's not. And he needs to find the fun again. Um, they should just out talent the Dolphins, who cannot move the ball.
I agree, but the Dolphins have moved to this power run game, and Cincinnati's rush defense has not been great, especially against power run games. So it sounds like you're on the Bengals minus 2.5. I'm actually going to take the Dolphins plus 2.5, and I would probably just skip the 2.5, and I would just take them on the plus 114 money line. But for the purpose of these picks, I'm going to take the Dolphins. Yeah, they lost last week, but to your point, they had a lot of opportunities. It was cold weather. Tua didn't even play like B minus level Tua. If he can play like B minus level Tua, I, I don't know, man. Like I got to see it again from Cincinnati to know that they care even a little bit. They lost 26-0 at home last week. It's gonna be better in Miami
In a divisional game, too.
in a
Yeah,
divisional
that's
game.
fair.
All right, we have a game now that is technically a doo-doo game because neither of these teams are in contention. But boy, I love Tyler Shuck, and I want to see the Saints keep winning. So we've got the Saints at home against the Jets. Let's play the game again. What do you think the spread is in this one?
The Saints are at home.
The Saints are at home, 4-10 against the 3-11 Jets.
Saints minus 4.5.
Saints minus 4.5. Ding, 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 ding. Who do you like?
I like the Saints a lot. I think Kellen Moore really has this team on the upswing. He's figuring out what's working. Tyler Shuck is playing himself into another year of um, a job next year. He's playing them out of having a top 5 pick where they would be able to take a quarterback, no brainer. I believe the Jets just fired their defensive coordinator after giving up
Mm-hmm.
48 to the Jags, and who knows how that's going to look. Aaron Glenn's not at risk. He's a first-year head coach. I think, Pete
He might be at
Carroll's
risk.
maybe, but I'd say Pete Carroll's probably way more of a risk because
True.
he was supposed
I
to
think they're
come in and
both going to be
stabilize.
gone at the end of the year, but I hear you.
And so yeah, my money's on the Saints. Devin Neal scored a touchdown, and I think 2 or 3 games in a row. He's really working out as a rookie running back. They're seeing what they have in him. I don't believe Alvin Kamara's coming back. I think his knee is still pretty banged up. So they're gonna run with the young guys. They've got Chris Olave to throw to. Give me the Saints.
All right. I'm also going to take the Saints. I think they win this game by a touchdown or more. They're a 4-10 team, but they're playing with the pride of a 10-4 team, and that matters when you have the Jets coming to town. They don't want to lose that game. They haven't quit on the season. I think a lot of the Jets players might have quit on the season, but the Saints haven't, and they're playing good football. And the Jets aren't as good as the Panthers team or the Bucks team that they just beat. I think they're going to keep it rolling. So let's go Saints. All right, we've got one more crappy game, 2 more crappy games, but only one more in the 10 a.m. slate, and that's Vikings-Giants. The Vikings, J.J. McCarthy and crew, are 3-point favorites at the Giants. I like the Vikings there. I can't deny the offensive talent that they have. Their defense, as we've talked about many times, punches above its weight, and the Giants are just decimated. It's on the road. It's hard to win on the road in the NFL. It's hard to win in New York in the elements. I can't not pick the Vikings here.
I'm with you on that front. I just don't know how the Giants are going to move the ball. This Vikings defense has showed up week in and week out. And yeah, they gave up 20 plus points to the Cowboys, but a lot of teams have given up 20 plus points to the Cowboys. That was in Jerry World. Give me the Vikings.
All right. This is the last game for the 10 a.m. slate. Bucks at Panthers. I'm curious. Are you going to get this one right? What do you think the spread is?
It's the home Panthers. The Bucks are on a slide. Panthers -2.5.
Bucks -3.
Wow.
Yeah. This one opened up Bucks -1.5. So Vegas didn't really know, but then it moved to 3 very quickly. So the sharp money, because the retail bettors don't bet during the week. They're waiting until kickoff. This is sharp money that's come in on Tampa Bay. So I think that's interesting to see. But the sharp money isn't always right. You always have to remember, like a professional bettor, they're making a profit at 59-60% win rate. If they're above 60, that's not sustainable, generally speaking. So they're going to lose a lot of those bets too. So just because the sharp comes in on it doesn't mean the sharp money is going to be right. But I think it's wrong here. I'm going to take the Panthers at home on the +130 money line. And if I'm going to take the spread, I'm definitely going to catch the 3 points.
I think it's tough because when you go down the roster, quarterback, edge Bucks. Running back, if Bucky's healthy, edge Bucks. You look at the receivers.
I don't know about that. I think Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard are a better duo than the trio of Bucky Irving, Rashad White, and Sion Tucker.
I love my guy Sion.
I know you do.
I think it's okay. I'll concede that point, but the gap between those two position
smaller
groups
than the gap at wide receiver and tight end.
Bingo.
Absolutely agree. Well, what do you say about the quarterbacks?
If we're just looking at the talent level, I think this
is
been...
if you got to take the Panthers run game, you get to take the Bucks receiving core and tight ends. Which quarterback do you put back there?
Baker, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. But there's been some inconsistency there, and as we've talked about multiple times, the home Panthers versus the away Panthers are just weirdly a thing this year. And looking at the trajectory of both teams, one has an arrow up, one has an arrow down. That's the Bucks, and the Panthers are like down, a little bit of a roller coaster, but it's like the S&P 500. It's still up and to the right over a long term.
It is. Like, who expected the Panthers to be at 7-7 right now, contending for the division title? Nobody. That's who. Nobody. All right. So it sounds like we're both on the Panthers +3 this week. All right.
Give me the Panthers.
Now, as we move to the early afternoon slate, the only total crap game is Falcons -2.5 at Cardinals. I'm going to just go NFC West and take the Cardinals there. I really have no idea. The Falcons on paper have more talent. They should win that game. But, like, if you're taking the Falcons, you are laying points with Kirk Cousins. And I need to go back to the rule book, but I'm pretty sure one of the rules of gambling on football is don't lay points with Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. For those not watching, I have a coin in my hand.
And you dropped it.
Give me the Falcons.
Okay,
that's how much I care about this one. But no, I do like the Falcons' run game, and I like their defense.
Jacoby, what's that? Gerald says you're on his turf. You need to back up.
Sorry, Gerald. I think Jacoby Brissett has done phenomenal.
Yeah.
I believe
he's one of the most serviceable backups in the league.
Absolutely. But, I'll take the Falcons. Let's make it interesting. I'll go the other way.
Now, speaking of interesting, the games get more interesting from here. And it starts with Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers visiting the Detroit Lions, where Detroit is a 7-point favorite. Who do you like here?
Detroit, dude. They're going to be pissed off after last week. And they're fighting for their playoff lives. They need to figure it out down the stretch. And where the Rams really succeeded this last week was finding a way to stop that duo running game in Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, and they bottled Gibbs up. I'm sorry. I don't know if TJ Watt is playing after he just had lung surgery, but this Steelers defense, they're going to really struggle to stop all of the star power on offense. And then I do believe that this Lions defense will be able to get some stops against the Steelers. And then, yeah, any NFC North team is going to want to beat up on Aaron Rodgers. There's going to be that vendetta game no matter what team he's playing for. I have to believe that.
John, you mentioned TJ Watt. He had a partially collapsed lung. And the fact that there's a question if he's not going to play, the assumption is he is going to play, but he might not. I mean, testament to that man and testament to modern medicine.
The Watts are insane. I'm sorry, but the Watts are insane.
Yeah.
They're not human. They're not like us.
All right, I'm going to take the Lions too. I think you're right. I think it's a bounce back game. I think with the Steelers, when we see the good of the Steelers, it works. But you and I have watched enough DK Metcalf to know that he's going to have one of those games every 5 or 6, and it will inflate his numbers. But he's going to have far more games where he absolutely disappears. You can't like that run game. I think the Steeler run game is better off with Kenneth Gainwell starting than Jaylen Warren starting, but I don't think it's going to matter in Detroit. I think the Lions are going to step all over the Steelers and win that one big. I think we're going to have another blowout, and so does Vegas, with Houston hosting the Raiders. The question is just, how big is the line going to be? How big do you think this line is at the moment?
Well, the biggest line that I've seen this year was Seahawks Colts last week at minus 13.5. I have to imagine it's got to be at least 9.5. Give me 11.5.
14.5.
Oh,
try that on for size.
I mean, it's not wrong. That Texans
a lot of faith in the Houston offense.
I mean, they're going to have short fields to work with. This Raiders defense hasn't stopped anybody. They're going to hit the Raiders quarterback. I wouldn't be surprised if we see 6 or 7 sacks. It's going to be brutal. They could have had Woody Marks continue playing last week, but they pulled him out because they were up 17-0 and they were moving the ball at will. CJ Stroud is getting more right every single game. He's figuring it out with Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz. Man.
Is there any chance that, just from a spread perspective, though, 14.5 points, is there any chance that it's a trap game? Because next week they go to the Chargers. And that, like we talked about it, that's the game the Texans have circled 5 times. They've got to win that game. Is there any chance they look past the Raiders and end up playing one of those games like the Broncos did earlier in the year, and Brock Bowers has like 10 catches for 150 yards?
I was thinking it could be a 24-14 game where Houston gets up big, like 17-0, and then steps off the gas. And
because I do think if you look at the player that had the most productivity against the Texans this year, it still is JSN. And if the Raiders can do one thing, it's use Brock Bowers the way the Seahawks use JSN. And Sam Darnold, better quarterback than Geno Smith. It's not even Geno Smith.
Geno's not the starter. Yeah, he's done.
Who is it even in Las Vegas?
It's somebody I had never heard of, I think. I saw that name.
Or he put up a whopping 0 points. Kenny Pickett.
That's right. Man. And trust me.
I'm sorry. I can't. I can't. I'm trying to talk myself into this because it's so many points, but give me the Texans 14.5.
Yeah, Kenny Pickett's going to get murdered. He really struggled to get the ball to Brock Bowers against the Eagles, and I know the Eagles have a great defense. Houston has a better defense when it comes to the pass rush.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they're playing more consistent football. Like, they are playing as well as anybody in the league right now. All right, so we're both on the Texans minus 14.5. We've got 2 games to go. The first one is the Sunday night game of the week. The Patriots have a chance.
We didn't finish out the afternoon slate.
What did I miss?
Jags,
oh boy, Broncos. I missed a big one, a big one. The Jags and the Broncos. The Broncos -3 at home, coming off that statement win, going against the Jags, coming off their own statement win. Who do you like here?
I really hate to say it, but I'm kind of leaning towards the Jags. Their defense has stepped up in a big way over the last several weeks. Trevor Lawrence has developed more and more chemistry with his wide receiving core since that Jacoby Myers trade, and weirdly, he's been consistent as hell. Travis Etienne is back and like back and now catching balls like crazy. They looked great last week. They looked great the week before. Patrick Surtain's only one man.
That he is only one man, but he is one man that's going to take Brian Thomas Jr. out of this game. And the whole defense is really good. If they didn't have Surtain, I would be a lot more worried for Denver because the Jags do have a true number one wide receiver. They have one true number one wide receiver. It's not Jacoby Myers. It's not Parker Washington. It is Brian Thomas Jr. And Surtain is going to shadow him. And I think I like Denver -3. I think Denver is going to win this game by a touchdown or more. I think the offense is playing really good football. And when a Sean Payton team really gets rolling on offense, it's rhythm. It's always been rhythm. And right now it feels like Bo Nix is in a rhythm. He was a rhythm quarterback at Oregon. And when he was in a rhythm, he was on fire. At times he looked like Marcus Mariota. It was the kind of rhythm that we never really saw with Dylan Gabriel. And I think we've seen little flashes of it from Dante Moore this year. But I do like the Broncos in this game, and I think we're going to see that kind of old school Trevor Lawrence face again for the first time, where it's just going to be those dead eyes.
I hope we do, because I may have put some scratch on Houston when they were 7-1 to win the division, and so if that's going to come to fruition, it all comes down to this. And what I'm probably going to do is put a little bit on the Jags as a hedge, because if they get past the Broncos, I think that bet is dead.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right, we've got the Patriots and the Ravens. The Patriots are 3-point underdogs. This is the third spread today that I think is just wrong. I think it's just wrong. I think that this is a product of the Ravens getting a shutout. And on paper, when you look at that, you go, the Ravens shut out Joe Burrow on the road. The Ravens defense is back. Lamar is back. I don't think they're back. I think that was more a testament to where Cincinnati is right now and where Joe Burrow is mentally and emotionally than anything else. And I think when we talk about pissed off teams, the Lions are going to be pissed off. Mike Vrabel is going to be pissed off. And I think the Patriots, look, they're a cold weather team. Whether they're playing in New England or Baltimore, that's the same weather. They're going to be in front of a very passionate Baltimore crowd. And yeah, I think that Drake May is still too green to win a Super Bowl this year, but he can go into Baltimore and beat these Ravens.
Lamar's getting healthier every week. The passing game is improving. And Derrick Henry's never really lost a step. Like, that's one thing to really remember. But Lamar still isn't running yet.
Can I argue on Derrick for a second? Because I've watched enough Steelers football to say, like, he still has some of those runs where you see the burst and the bullying. But it's not like it was 2 or 3 years ago. I would argue he hasn't lost a step in terms of the best that you're going to see from Derrick Henry in a game. But in terms of him being able to deliver that for 4 quarters and then do that all the way through a fourth quarter when everybody else is slowed down, I'm sorry. I don't see that from him anymore.
I think the biggest challenge this year has been their reliance on him because Lamar hasn't been able to move. He's taking more hits every single game. Now, obviously, we all age. You get deep into any given year, and it's going to be tough. But he's still got that speed once he gets into open space. And when he slams the accelerator, like, a man that big should not be able to move that fast. And he's still got that gear to tick into. But
he does.
You're not wrong. You have to be able to do that for 60 minutes, and in some games more than 60 minutes, and we'll see if he can continue to do that. Now, flipping to the other side of the field, the Ravens got very fortunate where Joe Burrow made some bad throws in the red zone, and Drake May has taken care of the ball really well this year.
England didn't lose that game because of Drake May. They scored 31 points.
Again, look, and Mike Vrabel said this in the post game, I believe, where he said they have a 6'7" or a 6'6", 240-pound monster who just won the MVP. Like, this happens sometimes. Like, when he's on the other side of the field, you do what you can, and some games you just can't do enough. And hey, ask the Ravens about this from week 1, as we mentioned earlier today. I have to think that the Patriots are going to come in. They're still in contention for the 1 seed. They need to hold off
Buffalo in the division.
But to be fair, like we also talked about, technically, for the division, this game doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
It all comes down to the Jets and Dolphins. And I have to think they know that, but also, you also want to be the 2 seed. You don't want to be the 3 seed. You want to play the team that's limping into the playoffs and just happy to be there, as opposed to, the 6 seed that has a little more gas in the tank.
Agreed. So it sounds like we're both on the Patriots +3.
Yeah.
All right. The last game of the week, Monday Night Football, we have the Niners visiting Phillip Rivers and the Colts in Indianapolis. The Niners are only -6 here, and that's actually a little suspicious to me. I thought this game would be -7.5. I thought it could be even as high as -8. I think the Colts are getting too much credit for how they performed in Seattle, which again, I think is more of a testament to Seattle not playing as well as it has in prior weeks, especially the offense, and not having, those explosive plays and some really weird drops. Like if you think about JSN had a couple of really weird drops. One on a crossing pattern that hit him right square in the chest. And he easily could have taken that for another 30 yards, and that would have changed the complexion of the game. The 49ers are on freaking fire, and they're scoring a ton of points. The defense is playing really well. I know they're not at home, but they're marching towards the playoffs, and I think they're being unreasonably overlooked, and I think they're going to stomp the Colts in Indianapolis. Like, I don't think this one's going to be close. 49ers -6 might be my favorite pick of the week.
I think it's just too many points. And the reason that I think it's too many points is my theory about Phillip Rivers is he's going to have 2 good games, and then his age is going to catch up with him, and he's going to fall off. There's not a ton of tape on what he is right now. He's not being asked to do much, and you still have Jonathan Taylor there to push the field, or to push the chains down the field and bully the other side, and there's no Fred Warner to slow him down, as we've talked about. Kyle Shanahan's going to get it done. I think it's going to be a 3-point game where, it feels like they really controlled the game, but Phillip Rivers found some rhythm, got the ball moving in a West Coast offense style, and it came down to one final drive from Brock Purdy to go get that win.
Yeah, and I will acknowledge that the 49ers have struggled a little bit with the running game. You had Tony Pollard last week went for 100 yards. Quinshon Judkins went for 91 the week before. In Carolina, you had, production between both running backs, even though the totals weren't as high. And so I think, there is an argument to be made that Jonathan Taylor could have a big game here. And that could be the thing that swings it in the Colts' favor, but I really don't see that happening. So I'm going to take the Niners. Sounds like you're on the Colts +6.
Give me the Colts. All this right. Is also a kitchen sink game for them, just like it is for the Ravens. If either of these teams want a shot at the playoffs, every single game down the line is must win.
Agreed. All right, John, before I let you go, we do have some college football playoff games this weekend, and I would like to ask you how you think those are going to shake out against the spread. So, starting with Friday, December 19th, we have our first game. We've got number 9 Alabama going against number 8 Oklahoma. The Oklahoma Sooners beat Alabama earlier in the year, so these two teams are playing in a rematch game, and in that first game, it was Oklahoma winning 23-21 in a close one. Oklahoma's offense has really struggled. This is a defense-led team through and through. Obviously Alabama is very passing-led. Their running game has struggled to get on track this year, but Alabama's a 1.5-point favorite in Norman. Who do you like in this game?
First off, can I just say, I just hope we get good games in the first round. Last year, it was 4 straight blowouts. They were all over within the first quarter, and I'm glad that we reshuffled who gets the buys. I think that's going to be really good. In this game, give me Alabama to seek some revenge. They got blasted by Georgia, but I think that's a testament to how much of a cut above Georgia is. I think Alabama comes in, their defense puts enough out there to slow down Oklahoma, and they get it done.
All right. Then we move to Saturday, and we start Saturday, 9 a.m. on the West Coast with number 10 Miami playing number 7 Texas A&M at Texas A&M in College Station. The Aggies are a 3.5-point favorite. Who do you like here?
Give me A&M in a blowout. Miami shouldn't be here. It should have been Notre Dame. Miami loses to bad teams, and their best win was against Notre Dame in week one, and week one games are always fluky. We know this. A&M has played real competition week in and week out. I mean, that sucks for A&M. They had one loss all year, and that was enough to deny them from the SEC championship and the championship game. And they play with big boys. They've had massive comebacks. They've had dominant wins. They're the more talented team. Give me A&M even with the points.
I don't know if it's going to be a blowout, but what I think is going to happen is Miami's leading at halftime, and then Texas A&M runs away with it in the second half. They've done that a couple times this year. I think that would be par for the course for Mario Cristobal to have the game in his hands and then just dump it out all over his feet. But that's the way that I think it's going to go. Give me A&M minus 3.5 as well. And I think that that's actually probably the most compelling pick of opening weekend. Then we've got Tulane and Ole Miss. Tulane's going back to Ole Miss. These two teams already played once this year, and Ole Miss whacked Tulane 45-10. Ole Miss was a 17.5-point favorite in that game. They're a 17.5-point favorite again in this game. I know Lane Kiffin's gone. Some of the staff is still there. The players are all still there. Why do we think this is going to go differently?
Because Lane Kiffin is gone. That's the only thing that changes here. But this isn't a meaningless bowl game where, yeah, it's a BCS bowl, but it's not a championship game, and they're playing without their coach, and none of the players care. Like, they are contending for a national title. They are going to come in, and they're going to want to show that they don't need Lane. Hey, recruits, look, we're still here. We are still building, not just for this year, but for next year. Great on Tulane to make it here, and we're going to say that again about, one of the teams in this last game, but there's going to be two blowouts in this round, and it's going to be this game as one of them.
And you know how I feel. Tulane shouldn't be here. With 12 teams, not enough spots. Like I give the group of 5 a guaranteed bid in Uncle Denny's model, in the Uncle Denny model, but that's a 16-team playoff. In a 12-team field, we just don't have room for teams like Tulane that don't belong here. And I think that we're going to see that. I think Ole Miss is going to kick the crap out of Tulane. To your point, it's going to be, if it's not four full quarters of suffocation, it's going to be because the game is so far out of reach after 3 quarters that they call the dogs off. So give me Ole Miss here, and I'd probably take Ole Miss and Texas A&M in a parlay because those two feel pretty good together. And then in our final game of the week, our beloved Oregon Ducks play in the 4:30 p.m. slot on the West Coast against the James Madison Dukes. Credit to James Madison, 12-1. I thought this game would be a 21.5-point spread. It's a 21-point spread. I think the Ducks cover it. They really should. James Madison, lost by a couple touchdowns to Louisville, which was the best competition they played all year. And they barely got past WSU, which is not great competition. I've got to think going into Autzen, they're going to have almost no fans. James Madison is a small school all the way across the country. I have to imagine that Oregon's going to win this game like 42-10 or something along those lines. But 21 feels like a lot. I'm still going to take Oregon. It just feels like a lot of points.
The only reason, or the only game flow I can think of, it would be a repeat of that Northwestern game where Oregon goes up 28-0. They get to halftime and they're like, okay, well, we don't want to have our players injured, so we're just going to keep running the ball. And then you have 10 garbage time points from James Madison in the fourth quarter. And I think that's pretty unlikely because this is not a Big Ten school. Credit, like you said, to James Madison for getting here. That is an accomplishment. Just like a 16 seed in March Madness, making it to the dance. But ultimately, what I foresee happening is our third stringers are going to come in, and they're just going to keep moving the ball and scoring.
I think so too. And, ultimately, the beauty pageant part of college football is over at this point, but you still want to feel like you're at the top of your game as a team. And so they're not going to want to pull out all the tricks in their playbook, but as you said, certainly the first stringers won't have to. And I think just the speed, the size, the talent of Oregon is going to overwhelm James Madison. When I watched James Madison play against WSU and I was watching their quarterback, I think it's Alonzo Barnett, man, it's like some of those old school mid-majors, not old school, but kind of those mid-majors that you've seen throughout the years where they have a dual threat quarterback, and he is just going to be overwhelmed by this Oregon defense.
Potentially some good reps for our second and third string, prepping for next year, though.
I will say one of the interesting things that caught my eye is the total on this game opened at 51.5, which felt low. I mean, that essentially meant, hey, they don't have a lot of confidence that James Madison's even going to be able to score. It's actually moved down 4 points to 47.5. So maybe that is a slight reflection of some confidence that the James Madison defense can punch above its weight. But I think more than anything, that is it's just a matter of how many points can Oregon score. Can Oregon get to 47.5? Because they might have to do it by themselves.
100%. Yeah.
So, all right, John, this was fun. An hour and 40 minutes of football, basketball, everything in between. I can't thank you enough for the time. Looking forward to seeing you this weekend. We've got our family Christmas party this weekend. And of course, it has to be on Saturday when all of these games are happening, including 2 NFL games. We've got a 5-pack of football games on Saturday, and I will have the family up and leaving the house very, very early so that we are not caught in the mountain pass for even a little bit of the action. A blast as always. I hope everybody out there has a great week. Good luck with all of your picks. I hope the football gods bless you as always. And we'll be back soon.
Happy holidays. Happy watching.
Cheers, y'all.